Every day, you tap a card, you book a flight, you move money, and somewhere behind the scenes, something just makes it work. You never see it, you never think about it, and I didn't either. Here's what got me. Roughly 70 to 75% of the world's transactions run through a machine most people assume disappeared decades ago, the mainframe. So when IBM invited me to their Poughkeepsie campus, where they build these things and then try everything they can to break them, I had to see it for myself. Now, normally on this channel, I go learn something, bring it back to you. This time, I want you to come with me because almost everything I assumed about mainframes turned out to be wrong. Let's go check it out.
We have 200 mainframes here, and they are fully dedicated to system verification.
This is Building 12. 200 mainframes under one roof, all here for one reason, to get tested until they break. So the ones you depend on never do. But before we got to any of that, PJ corrected me on my first assumption, what a mainframe even is.
Is it all of it? Is it one part of it and there's complementary parts? It's the whole thing, right? It is the whole system. It's the hardware, the firmware, and the operating system running. And by the way, when we think of mainframe, generally, it's not just one of these guys. It's a couple of these guys coupled together. Yep. Mainframes are an essential and critical part of our modern way of life. Credit card transactions, financial industries, healthcare, insurance, travel, all that on the back ends, powered by this mainframe technology, right?
Yeah, that is wild. Like all those things I absolutely just use every single day, and I guess I don't think twice about it. Yeah.
Which is kind of good because that means you take it for granted. It's expected to work, right? And these are these silent giants that run our entire way of life.
It runs the most critical infrastructure, right? So it is something that the biggest clients, governments rely on for its security, resiliency, and scale performance.
It's really part of that backroom core kind of process that goes into all of IT.
When I make credit card transactions, I haven't had a true fraudulent transaction in years because they almost always catch it. Basically, everybody's using credit cards nowadays, so we're talking millions of transactions, potentially a second. That load is insane to cover, so having a mainframe do that kind of work, actually, it's like tailor-made for it.
Absolutely. I mean, if you think about it, right, coming out of the pandemic, like we've effectively moved to a cashless society. That whole transition is on the backbone of the mainframe, right? The transactions, whether it's the credit card network that connects when you swipe the card, and then telling the point of sale system that like, yep, Jerry could walk away with that TV or that cup of coffee, right? All of that happens on this hardware.
So these machines quietly run the planet, which left me with one question. How reliable do they actually have to be? The answer honestly stopped me.
Your level of downtime commitment, or SLA, whatever you want to call it, of 0.3 of a second a year, I had to read it twice because I was like, what? This must be a typo, but it's not. 0.3 of a second a year. How do you achieve that level of resilience? Because it's amazing.
Yeah. Just to put it in context, like 0.3 of a second is like the average eye blink. Like that's it. It doesn't happen by accident, right? It happens because we engineer the product from the ground up to be highly resilient, highly available, have kind of fully redundant systems in place. That way, stuff goes wrong. It happens, right? It's hardware. It'll fail eventually. Firmware too. You got bugs, but is the design resilient enough to ride that through? My motto is like, you can't test quality into the product. You could have the best test cycle, but if quality is not part of day one, like you don't get to 8 nines reliability just by magic. So this is the processor drawer, right? So this is kind of the brains of the system, and kind of the major two components we're looking at here is the DCM, right, which is this guy, the dual tip module, and this socket is the exact cutout here. So we're actually doing direct-to-chip cooling, okay, out of this system.
Now, is all of this also modular the way the cards were on the back? Like if this RAM hardware fails, you could pop it and pop another one?
Absolutely. So, for example, these are our custom memory DIMM controllers, and we have what we call is RAIM. Think of RAID, where you deploy it across disks. We have RAIM, and we do the same thing effectively across memory. So if you have a bank or row fail, you kind of could replace it, the system would run. And then one of the hardest tests we do is called concurrent drawer repair. So as long as you have 2 drawers in the system, you could replace and service any part in one of these processor drawers without taking the system down.
And so it really is a lot like Ray, where you could have 3, 4 hard drives and one fails, pop it. Or if you had 2, you could one fails, you pop
Correct.
it. Yeah,
correct. But this is replacing the processor while the engine's running.
Yeah. It's not nearly as simple as Ray, but yeah, no, it's an engineering marvel, frankly.
Yeah.
Talk me through, how are you testing these things?
So there's multiple phases. So you have this pre-hardware phase, right, where you're doing this simulation. Once hardware shows up, now starts like the integration phase, right? It's how do we test at the smallest component possible, right? If you think of like a building blocks, right? It's hard to have a big structure and then find a problem, on a piece that's inside. But if I test each component as I go, each component as I connect it, I build more and more complex systems, and that's our integration phase until we get to the final system test, right? It doesn't stop when we ship it. We continue testing this thing for years after it's in the field. Because we take pride in that.
PJ, I know you guys do the testing across the technical stack, but what about at the physical, layer?
Yeah, I mean, we do a bunch of environmental testing as well, right, on these systems, and kind of what we're walking past here are our thermal chambers. We treat this like a refrigerator / air fryer, right? We kind of crank it all the way down low to about 4 degrees Celsius and then crank it up to about 40 degrees Celsius.
Basically nuke something or freeze it.
And if you want to put one of these in a mountain on Tibet and run it, you can. We qualified up to 3,000 meters above sea level. We also do earthquake testing. All those environmental things are in mind when we're designing and building the system, right? We don't build the system now it also has to work in an earthquake environment, right? Yeah. That's all part of kind of the engineering and kind of the history of effort we put, because we know how foundational this stuff is. It's got to work everywhere.
I know that you're testing for every scenario that you guys can think of, but what happens when there's a defect discovered by a client out in the field?
First I cry, and then, because at the end of the day, I take responsibility for that, right? But seriously, we triage it, we fix the client, get them a solution, right? We spend about 40% of our test effort on that recovery, where we inject errors, do a repair scenario, and kind of bring that system back on, because that's a big differentiator when I think about the platform versus other platforms, is what other systems can you repair the memory while the system's running, right? There's not many, because it's very hard to do, and we spend a lot of time getting that right.
All right, everything so far told me these machines do not quit, but security's my world, so this is the part I really came for. It gets dense, so let me frame it as 3 simple ideas. The assumptions that just died, the hardware that fights back, and how they're already ready for AI and quantum. Start with the assumptions.
What's a security assumption that is just 5 years ago people had that's outdated nowadays?
It used to be sort of a trust but verify kind of security model, right? And now it's really a zero trust. I mean, security went from everybody's working in the building to everybody's working at home. Pretty much everything's multi-factor authentication, passkeys, and just to get logged into things that you traditionally would have been like, oh, he's got his password, so it's him, right? Yeah. The other thing that I would say is elliptical curve cryptography, right? I mean, the assumption always was that this was the most safe kind of crypto in the world, and now it's like, well, quantum can break that, right?
Yeah.
And that last assumption, that today's encryption is safe, is exactly why the next thing Will handed me matters so much. This one little card.
Right, so this is a hardware security module developed for FIPS level 4, which means that it is physically protected from any tamper attempts. The moment that we initialize these cards, they are essentially always protecting against any type of drilling attempts, any chemical attacks, and any physical attack that you're going to try to do within the card.
If I did tamper with this, what happens?
The device essentially renders itself useless. We erase all the keys, and at that point, there is some diagnostics that we can do into that, but all the cryptographic material and important data gets automatically erased.
Oh my gosh, okay, that's very cool, dude. I love it.
Encrypting data sitting in a database or moving across the internet, we've got that. The hard one has always been protecting data while it's actually in use. So I asked, how do they pull it off?
From the ground up, starting with the hardware, we actually do quite a bit of protection, right? So enough error checkings, we do enough multiple engines. Sometimes we have engines that are running in lockstep, cycle by cycle. We're making sure that those two processors have not deviated from each other. And if something like that happens, we actually bring down the card and we say, okay, we gotta go through some recovery because there's been some sort of deviation. And the intent of that is to always guarantee and secure the customer data at most important.
I'm curious, with the device being kind of locked in when it leaves the factory, and goes to client site. When you're updating algorithms or maybe thinking quantum resistant, is it get shipped back?
We've been focusing, especially over the last couple of years, into adding more and more programmability. So this design actually has an FPGA. So we are able to go in and release newer cryptographic algorithms like MLDSA, MLCAM, right? This stuff that we've been working on accelerating, and also the firmware within the card can be upgraded in the field. So when we ship something, we want to be able to have that. And that's what we talk about more when we refer to something like crypto agility, right? Which is we need to be able to provide this new set of standards and algorithms as the world keeps changing more.
Sounds like a new sports drink, crypto agility. I love it. What are your thoughts as a hardware cryptographic architect around what quantum's going to do to your part of the world?
I mean, it's something that very much we are aware that it is going to happen, right? So once a quantum computer becomes strong enough, it's going to immediately break all the current classical cryptography. We don't know when it's going to happen, but the intent is that we can very quickly release new algorithms and new standards into the field so the customers can pick them up and use them.
And it's the same story with AI, not bolted on at the end, but built right into the chip and into how they think about risk.
One of the most critical things that we've done is integrate the AI into our processor with the Telum chip and the Spire accelerator. And we're seeing a lot of this notion of confidential AI, and that's where confidential computing comes in to be able to protect it while it's in use.
One of the things that AI does great is synthesize huge amounts of data, right? And that's really what you're seeing this be able to do, right?
The ability to scale up, scale out within a single processor, that's going to be huge, especially when we talk about data center space and power and energy, right? We have a real advantage from that perspective on how you could scale up in our platform. The other thing is identity management, and it's just one more thing that security professionals have to manage, right? Yeah. Too many certificates, too many secrets, too many keys, workloads, right? And now they have to worry about AI agents that, before it was really a human and identity, and now it's agents, and that just, the proliferation is so vast, and that's where the automation comes in.
For all the engineering, the thing that stuck with me wasn't a chip or a stat. It was the people.
I haven't met anyone who hasn't worked here for a long time. So, clearly, it's both identifying great people as well as having a mission that is very easy to get behind and want to celebrate. And based on what I saw, like you mentioned, the airline industry, the financial industry, et cetera, these are truly mission critical for society to function at large. So the stakes
Absolutely.
Are quite high. That's
really what it is. Yeah, and that level of understanding, right? When you go into a grocery store and swipe your credit card to pay, understanding that, hey, that transaction is running on a mainframe somewhere, right? And there are millions of people that are doing that every day. 75% of the transactions that are done in the entire world run through a mainframe every day. So the global economy is really dependent on us.
We feel extremely responsible for our clients and their business and the technology that we provide to them. And it's really how you show up and the relationship you have with that client that forms that trust, right? It's a trust. And we call our clients trusted advisors.
One of the fun things I see is I have many customers come in that say, hey, I've worked on this platform for 30 plus years. I've never seen one in person. I'm like, well, there's one, go hug it, right? These being, so important platforms, people don't have access to them, right? And even in their work environment. So just giving people access to it, see it, touch it, understand the amount of effort it takes to deliver the box, the platform, I think it opens people's eyes, right?
I showed up assuming mainframes were a thing of the past. I left convinced they're one of the most important machines almost nobody thinks about, quietly running the world, engineered to never quit, secured from the silicon up, and already built for whatever AI and quantum bring next. So the next time you tap your card and it just works, you'll know what's humming away underneath. I'm Jerry from Simply Cyber. Keep challenging your assumptions, and I'll see you in the next one.